Hey, it's me, Big P, and I'm here to go over some of the Inquisitor changes that have been made in the upcoming rework for 3.13. If you've seen the thumbnail of this video, it's, in my opinion, a bit of a mixed bag. I really maybe wasn't gonna make this video, but at least in my head, I'm the resident Inquisitor guy. I've been fighting for Inquisitor for many leagues now. I mean, ever since Metamorph. Even before then, he's really been kind of my pet ascendancy. And at least for league starts, I think it's honestly one of the better options. I don't think that's necessarily changed, but there's a couple issues I have with what's going on here in terms of a full rework. Let me just double check that my picture of the rework comes up proper. Yeah, okay, so we're going to have a reference of the old and and what's changed. So let's just get right into it so that this video isn't all crying and bitching. And we're going to start with, you can pretty much break down my feelings on the rework into three sections. We have the good, which is the Pious Path, what do you call it, tree. And then you have the bad, which is inevitable judgment. Not that inevitable judgment is bad. Then we have the ugly, instruments of virtue, and the rework that's gone in before. And then also the whatever, because they didn't touch augury of penitence at all. So, I'm not really going to talk about that. I don't usually take this anyway, although it is good. On elemental builds, I suppose. But yeah, let's get into it. So, first off, the good. Sanctuary and Pious Path, in my opinion, kind of a straight buff. There are some people lamenting the loss of mana regen on the Sanctuary node, but it's what? It's 15 mana per second while on Consecrated Ground. I feel like, as long as you're a spell build, maybe there's some attack builds that might have some issues with it, but even so, I don't think that's going to be that big of a difference. And that's a huge 5% more damage, increasing the effectiveness of the damage taken. I'll take that. That's really strong, especially when you go fully into Pious Path, which now, of course, not only gives regen. It's kind of an interesting like pseudo Zealot's Oath, although it's better than Zealot's Oath because when you're, it will apply the life regen that you have to your energy shield instead. So although you are losing the 200 flat, I believe, and the attack and cast speed, I don't know. It's slightly more defensive. It's really the sort of thing that A is going to depend on the build. You're probably going to have a decent amount of life regen just basically, and I've been running like a low level vitality on a lot of my builds now that kind of, especially if I can like kind of double dip on Inquisitor in this one, then sure. I think it's totally fine. And, Pious Path is still going to be probably something you want to take at least by your third so that you get immunity to ailments. That's really the big one. Immunity to elemental ailments is fantastic. It helps you free up a lot of flash slots, helps you save on alts. Oops. Excuse me, sir. I'm doing a video here. So yeah, Pious Path, not that bad. I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is what's happened to Righteous Providence. Let's see. So it's really not going to be that bad because I'm looking at a late game tree with basically zero investment into stat stacking. People are really looking at stat stacking now for Inquisitor because Righteous Providence previously just gave you 100% flat increase chance, and then 50 to crit multi. We're losing, and we're also losing effective non-damaging ailments. This was kind of like a nice little cherry on the way to Inevitable Judgment that I think I'm going to feel a lot more. I think people are kind of underestimating. Effective non-damaging ailments doesn't exactly seem like the sort of thing that's like but when it starts affecting your chill and your freeze and or your shock on your elemental build, it's kind of I guess in some cases where it wasn't a thing for you, if you're taking this, if you're not doing elemental damage and then not going into Inevitable Judgment, I don't know. It seems a little funky to me. Inquisitor is clearly, it has so many, elemental damage nodes here. I'm not really sure why they would kind of lean away with that without giving really anything in return. And not to mention that, critical strike chance is fine, but I feel like after a certain point with your gear, it's not really necessary. Like, you will effectively hit your crit chance cap very easily, even without any help. To be fair, the node does give 50 strength and int now, so I guess even if you take it like first, it might be effectively more crit chance and maybe, overall more consistency with your crit. But crit multi is a sort of thing that, 45 to crit, you're pretty much always going to have ailments up on any, unique mob or boss where, it matters, unless like they can't be affected by the ailments. So you just lose that crit multi, 45% crit multi. You'll have to make it up somewhere else with your damage. And then something that really concerns me is they didn't touch Inevitable Judgment at all. And I guess that's okay, but I feel like there could have been something done to maybe make Inevitable Judgment feel more modern, more effective, or at least work better with current sources of penetration between all the curses and hexes and exposure that we have available to us. It's becoming increasingly easier to go into negative resistances with monsters. So this is the sort of thing that I think really for bossing, maybe something that could have been done is make it penetrate like 20%. I'm just spitballing. I don't really know the base elemental resistances of monsters, although I know that the bosses have upwards of anywhere from like 40 to like 65, maybe 75, depending if they're like, of that element. So I was thinking something like normal monsters get 10%, magic monsters get like 25%, rares get like 30 something, and then unique bosses or whatever get like 50% in terms of elemental penetration. And that way you can kind of scale it and stack it and adjust it to, it would be in some cases less effective, but it would at least make Inquisitor scalable into late game. I think a lot of the problems that Inquisitor had was that people would look at this and say, yeah, this is good, but, in my magical Christmas land where my Orb of Storms, proc this and, has this, and it's not exactly magical Christmas land, but what I'm saying is if you can make Inevitable Judgment, keep its utility without really having to think about it as it exists now, but still sort of make it more flexible for scaling late game builds, because if you can fit in overpen into your build, it's it's going to end up being a huge amount of damage. It's multiplicatively more damage, and Inquisitor basically doesn't have any access to that at all if you're taking this. It's just your crits will ignore, and the non-crits will penetrate 10%, which is like, I don't know. You're probably going to be critting as an Inquisitor, so it's not really, I feel like that second line is like, whatever, it doesn't really matter. I just kind of sort of wish, I feel like they took a look at Inquisitor and saw that 99.9% of people were taking this node, and so they figured, yeah, it's fine, we don't need to change it at all. But I really think that Inquisitor sort of, kind of fell by the wayside because of this sort of thing, and it just ended up that Inevitable Judgment is the best node for Inquisitor, so obviously every Inquisitor is taking it. Not necessarily that it's in a good competitive spot as an Ascendancy, because I still feel like it's good, and I like it for early league start where, it's going to make my crits feel effective. And with the new, Righteous Providence, we're going to get those crits a little more consistently early on, but again, we're losing that late game scaling and a little bit of utility on the effective non-damaging ailments. Then we come to Instruments of Virtue. Instruments of Virtue was kind of a weird meme. I think people were taking it like all the way back when like EK Inquisitor was a thing. Shield Charge is not a great move skill anymore. You'll get caught on all sorts of things. You can still use it by all means, and you might want to for the new stuff here, but I don't know. I gotta say, Instruments of Zeal just kind of seems like a trap to me. I feel like Inevitable Judgment, Instruments of Virtue is really all I'm gonna be going into, if at all. It just feels strange and gimmicky to me. There's no other way to put it. I mean, where Inquisitor is on the tree. Oh, what'd I do? Get out of here. He starts here. If you go this way, you're a spell build. This is where the spell juicy stuff is. If you go this way, you're an attack build. I guess you can go around here and do stuff here. Elemental, if your attack and spell both do elemental damage, it's good here, especially for conversion stuff. Pretty much think that any good battle mage build is going to be a staff, if not just because you get stuff like counterweight here, which this sort of multi and crit chance will apply to both your attack and spell that you're using. Not so much for something like, for example, if you want to use like a sword, people are talking about like Void Forge, I think, because that's been good with Inquisitor. But this is, damage with ailments, sword attacks, like if you're doing a fire sword, I guess that applies. Accuracy rating you're going to need because you're nowhere near dex on the tree. I think that's another thing that it's like kind of weird that they would force a, what are you going to do? You're going to go resolute technique with an Inquisitor? Like it just feels a little strange and gimmicky. Don't get me wrong, I'm definitely going to make an Inquisitor, and I'm definitely going to have fun trying to make an interesting battle mage, whether it be Spellslinger, or I've been thinking like Ice Crash, Glacial Cascade. It's fun and it's cool, but ultimately I feel like it's a gimmick that maybe doesn't really have the support. It feels like a sort of PoE2 thing where if you can have, more than 2 6 links, then you can sort of justify it. But I think generally what I've seen, and I kind of agree with the sort of theory that there's just no point in taking it. There's not, it doesn't give any damage, really. I mean, it gives more cast speed, reduced mana cost, and increased area of effect. That's okay for, max fanaticism stacks, and who knows how consistent that will be to keep up. But it's not like a huge, bump of damage. Battle Mage is probably the only interesting thing, and they're starting to throw that on items like, not Pledge of Hands, Martyr of Innocence, and Disintegrator, which were, definitely two staffs you probably would look towards with Inquisitor. So you're going to be getting it anyway, so you don't have to go into that. I don't know. I just feel like we also have that with the new whatchamacallit too. People are talking about, where is it? I can't read it. It's too tiny on my screen. Righteous Providence. People are saying, oh yeah, it's going to be great if you go Astromentus, and then you're going to have to use Shaper's Touch to get Dex here. And then I'm basically just halfway making a fucking Guardian. Why don't I just roll a Guardian instead and be unkillable on half the budget and save my fingers the alternating between spells and attacks? It's, Path of Exile is a game about opportunity cost, and I think that investing into Inquisitor is going to be a fun and interesting sort of thing to tinker with, and I love tinkering with builds, and I love seeing what works and what won't. But ultimately, I think even though I am going to do an Inquisitor and probably stick to this sort of skill tree, it comes with some caveats, and I'm not 100% thrilled with what they've done. I feel like they kind of, and now that it's been reworked, it's not going to happen again. I feel like, they're not going to double back on the sort of gimmicky rework into Instruments of Virtue. And Righteous Providence, I mean, it just seems like they're pushing this in a slightly different direction while ignoring this node here. And again, rest in peace, Augury of Penitence. I mean, it's still good, if you're in melee range, yes. If you'll take it, maybe. If you're not, you won't. I mean, like, I don't know. I don't want to ramble too much on with this video because ultimately it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to be the guy to tell you, like, never buy any MTX ever again because they ruined my boy. Because they didn't ruin my boy. They gave him some interesting side grades, let's say. Let's try and keep positive about this. It's just a sort of thing that ultimately is a little bit disappointing. I was kind of hoping for a bigger, like, wow, shock. But as they went over more and more of the nodes, I pretty much felt exactly the same, if not slightly worse, about the Ascendancy, which people were already pretty down on. I mean, that's me who's played, Heist, I started Crackling Lance Inquisitor, and it got me a very quick Awakener 5 kill. I was very satisfied with how it was, even with a bad skill like Crackling Lance, which is getting buffed, by the way. Go check my build guide, and you will be very successful with it, probably. I don't know. I just don't know what else to say. But yeah, thanks to Grimro for kind of inspiring me to make this video. He did a really good video on the Deadeye changes, kind of a similar style video where they go over the changes and the rework and come to the conclusion that it's like kind of weird. You kind of, at least you don't have like really weird clunky mechanics like Deadeye bouncing the chain off walls, which, I don't know what the hell is going on with stuff like that. But Inquisitor hasn't been completely gutted, but it is ultimately a little bit disappointing. And we're going to have to see if Battle Mage is really cool and strong enough to justify going for it, because now, I don't know, it's a sort of thing where if you got more ascendancy points, it would be okay, but I don't see any real point in going into the Instruments of Virtue tree, because, Pious Path has been straight buffed, and Inevitable Judgment is just the iconic Inquisitor ascendancy. So the rework kind of feels like it didn't really do much to me. They have the fun thing here, but I feel like it's a bit of a trap. I feel like it's a bit of a thing where, people are. I don't want to put the tinfoil hat on, but I feel like GGG kind of intentionally makes these sorts of holes for players to fall into, where the best thing that a player can do is fuck around with their weapon, to try and tweak it to build spells, to spend a bunch of regrets going out of parts in the tree so that they can go into weird shit here that they're going to respec out of later, we're getting a bit more speculative and less about Inquisitor itself. But I don't know, I think we're going to have to see. I'm going to definitely have to see for myself, so stay tuned to the channel, because I don't think it's going to be my first build. I feel like something like Battle Mage and beyond is going to take a lot more currency than one might initially think, to make work. But hey, I'm willing to admit that I'm wrong. If I try it and it's actually amazing, that would be great. But yeah, again, this is speculation before patch notes and skill gem reworks and that sort of stuff. So it's not, really, these are just my initial sorts of reactions to this sort of thing, to an ascendancy that I'm very passionate about, and I thought I'll admit it wasn't in a great place, but it was definitely in a functional place, and they've sort of hamstringed a bit of that utility and function. Not to a huge degree. Still get elemental ailment immunity. I was really scared that they were going to get rid of that. That's very nice, and at least they didn't, nerf Inevitable Judgment, so that they would make the other nodes be more, viable. I don't know. We'll see. Thanks for watching. There's going to be a lot more videos in the coming weeks. Maybe not within this week, because I'll be trying to be a variety streamer until I am locked into the Atlas for the foreseeable future. But yeah, thanks for watching, and let me know what you're going to start. Let me know what your thoughts on Inquisitor is. If you have any interesting Battle Mage rework sort of ideas that you're floating around that I've maybe overlooked, go ahead and let me know, because it would be really... I'm definitely willing to change my mind on it, but right now, it's like I said, it's good, and it's bad, and it's ugly. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.